Today we'll be getting into things you typically only learn after a few trips down to Walt Disney World. Hello and welcome to the Let's Go to Disney podcast. I'm Oliver.
And I'm Lucy.
Today is Sunday, June 1st, and you're listening to episode 90, Things We Wish We Knew Before Our First Disney Trip. Before we get into today's main topic, here's what's going on in the parks right now. We teased it last week that a date would likely be coming soon for Disney's new nighttime parade over at Magic Kingdom, and sure enough, Disney announced this week that Starlight, Dream the Night Away, will officially debut on July 20th. The parade will be led by the Blue Fairy from Pinocchio and floats from classic and new Disney films. Disney also released a whole merchandise line celebrating the new nighttime parade, and it's like, iridescent and purple, and it looks really
fun.
It looks really cute. One thing to note is that Park Pass reservations will be required for annual pass holders wanting to head to Magic Kingdom starting on July 20th. So, that's not necessarily different because you do need Park Pass reservations,
True.
But they do have good to go days. So even on good to go days, you are going to need Park Pass reservations starting on July 20th. And that also applies to if you want to enter the park after 2 p.m., you would still need a Park Pass reservation. One thing that isn't affected, though, is park hopping. So if you had a Park Pass for another park and you entered that park and then you were hopping to Magic Kingdom after, you're good to go there. You don't need a Park Pass reservations separately for Magic Kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
And, this is likely because Disney anticipates that this parade is going to draw some major crowds for at least, the first little while, maybe the first few weeks, right? So no end date has been announced for when these rule changes are going to end for annual pass holders, if they end at all. So we'll report that here when we know more. 2 new shows debuted as well in Walt Disney World this week, and that's Disney's Villains Unfairly Ever After and The Little Mermaid, a musical adventure. Both of these are officially open in Disney's Hollywood studios. Unfairly Ever After is down Sunset Boulevard, right? This is where Lightning McQueen's Racing Academy used to be. And the show features a ton of Disney villains who plead their case as to why they are the ones that have been treated the most unfairly, right, over time. So guests are actually going to get to vote for which villain they think makes the best case, right? And then the show ending is going to vary depending on what guests decide, which is pretty cool.
That's such a fun concept. I love it.
Yeah.
So the other show, The Little Mermaid, a musical adventure, features a loose interpretation of the movie with new show elements and songs. It's a fresh take on the show that used to be housed in this space, and it's great to finally see both of these attractions open. It adds 2 amazing shows to an already impressive lineup over at Hollywood Studios.
Yeah, agreed, 100%.
And then over in Universal Orlando, big news for us especially, Hagrid's Magical Creatures Motorbike Adventure has finally been added to the Universal Express Pass. This is just a huge plus because the wait times on this ride are always astronomical.
Always super high, yeah,
except for first thing in the morning. So like I said, up to this point, it was not included in the Universal Express Pass or Universal Express Pass Unlimited. So if you purchase Express Pass or are staying at a Universal Orlando Premier Resort, you do not have to worry about the standby queue in this attraction going forward. And that is such big news for me.
Yeah, no, for sure. Because, when we go in November, it's going to be the kids' first time there.
And it's it's our favorite ride.
Exactly.
There.
It's so good. And I think they're really going to love it as well. So we can just go on it over and over.
So pumped for that.
Yeah.
So for us, we are really in the thick of things coming up to the end of the school year and activities in the next few weeks. The last day of school for our kids is June 26th. So that's actually coming up right away. Baseball season for both of our kids are in full swing, and we're pretty much at the Ball Diamond every single night. Sometimes at least one of us is there with sometimes both kids at different parks, so we're spreading out. It's crazy, but we're getting through it. Sophia's dance season is also closing. This is her last week of dance this week. So she has her big recitals next weekend. We've got tickets for that. My parents are coming and my aunt and uncle. So we're really excited to see her on stage. It's going to be lots of fun. And then it'll also be nice that it's kind of over for the summer so we can just relax a bit.
No, exactly.
And then our son Caleb will have a baseball tournament the weekend that school ends. And after that, we're going to be on break for the summer, which we are really, really looking forward to. Our days are long and the weeks are just flying by at this point.
No, exactly. For sure. And then for vacation planning, we talked about this last week, but we've been on the fence about doing our whole stay at Helios Grand versus doing a split stay with one of the existing premier resorts to take advantage of Express Pass Unlimited, essentially on the days that we're Universal Studios Florida and Islands of Adventure. And we pulled the trigger on that yesterday. So I was on the phone with Universal for almost an hour, and the cast member that was helping me was absolutely amazing. I didn't catch her name, but essentially what we've done here is we'll be staying at Portofino Bay for 3 nights. And the reason we are doing Portofino Bay over Royal Pacific or even Hard Rock is because it was the cheapest of the 3. No other reason. So that'll be good. So our arrival day and our first 2 park days are going to be there. And then on the 4th day, we're going to check in at Helios Grand for 2 nights and do our 2 Epic Universe days back to back. So we booked a theme park view room, which I've seen videos of, and I literally cannot wait for that. It's going to be amazing. Like the views that you get from these theme park view.
Amazing.
Yeah, 100%. I'm literally giddy when I think about this upcoming trip because,
So much new things to experience for us and also for our kids. So
Yeah.
it's just going to be an amazing time, I think.
Agreed.
So with that being said, let's get into today's main topic, which is things guests usually learn and gain perspective on, having been to Disney World at least a couple of times. We've had the benefit of going many times, especially in the last few years, and with every trip, we're learning something new. And from chatting with our friends and other guests who have also been to Disney multiple times, we find that there's always some common trends among these folks and how their thoughts and attitudes have changed in regards to their Disney trips over time. So the thought for today is we'll give you some of these perspectives that hindsight can give you, which I think can take the pressure off of your first couple of trips.
Yeah, agreed. 100%.
And if you are a Walt Disney World regular, some of these things will definitely resonate with you.
Yeah, no, for sure. So with that, let's talk pre-planning. So without fail, one of the most common questions we get from people that are planning, or considering going to Disney for the first time is, when should I go, right? So Disney vets know that this is such a broad question, and really, outside of the major holidays and big events like the marathon weekend, any time is a good time. Okay. So a lot of people will obsess with, not hitting certain parks on certain days of the week and want to know exactly what week they should be there. And really, it's not worth, in our opinion at least, to get that into the weeds about it. It's so hard to predict exactly just how busy the parks are going to be that, that could just create more stress for you than just picking a time that works best for you and then making that time work, right?
Absolutely. I completely agree with you.
And, like in broad strokes, certain times of year will on average be less busy. Okay. So think like late August and early September. And this is just because kids are going back to school. And on average, parents are not going to pull their kids out of school like the very first weeks of school, right? That's just, what it is. But even with that, this year it's a little wonky because the Destination D23 event is in the last few days of August this year. So it's going to be busier than normal for that reason alone because, a whole influx of people are going to be going down just for that.
Yeah,
exactly.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So the long and short of it is check the events calendar and the stat holiday calendar. If there's nothing major planned, you're more than likely going to be fine. We've been there in various weeks in January, February, March, April, May, August, September, November, and December in the last 5 years. And trip over trip, we didn't find any major differences in crowd levels overall. Again, outside of that late August, early September range where it is consistently lower.
Yeah, no, exactly. But, outside of that, like you're saying, like January, February, March definitely. And then that November, December, it's just, it feels somewhat similar. So, I don't think it's worth sweating.
Honestly, Disney is never not busy.
Yeah,
it's
agreed.
just sometimes
it's really busy, and then
really
sometimes
busy.
it's just busy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then like other things too, like fall, not so much September, but mid-September to end of September, and especially October, it's going to be busier because people want to be there for Halloween.
100%.
They want to experience all the decorations and the parades. And then, of course, the Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween party.
Yeah,
That's a big one for people.
No, exactly.
And then you go into right after that, Christmas.
Yeah, because literally like overnight, right? Like so Halloween
literally.
on the 31st is usually the last Mickey's Not So
Yes.
Scary. Sometimes it's been the first couple days of November, but basically after the last Mickey's Not So Scary, the Halloween decorations come down, the Christmas decorations start to come up, and then like throughout November, it ramps up again.
And let me tell you, you want to be there at some point in your Disney vacationing at Christmas time because wow.
Oh, so beautiful.
Like I can't even fully describe the decorations that go into this.
The parks,
and
the resorts.
It's just absolutely beautiful. And then of course they have Mickey's Very Merry Christmas Party. And then Hollywood Studios has Jollywood Nights. And there's
that just started in 2023.
There's just so much to experience. So you're obviously going to get busier times during that as well. But we went in December of 2022. Correct me if I'm wrong. No, 2023.
Yeah, 2023.
And
it was very end of
that's right.
November into the first few days of December.
It was just before our daughter's birthday, which is on December 5th. And it was a nice time. It was almost like that after American Thanksgiving and before
the Christmas
break and all that stuff like that. So we found that was actually a really nice time to go, and we got to experience everything Christmas related.
Yeah, no, for sure. And, exactly, right? And then it gets progressively busier as you get closer to Christmas.
Absolutely.
And then, of course, like anything, after the first week of March into like the third week of April is spring break pretty much across North America, right? So people are going to have spring breaks at different times, and then Easter falls somewhere in that, right? So that's going to be busy as well. But
you
again,
just check those crowd calendars and just anticipate there will be people there with you.
No, exactly.
And then, of course, like another thing to consider is weather, right? So from June to November, ish. This is hurricane season. And then summer brings daily showers, especially in the afternoon. So like expect rain sometimes,
almost
right?
every single day. Like,
Absolutely.
Even if it starts out to be a super sunny morning, inevitably what happens is cloud cover comes and then, 2, 3, 4 o'clock, there's like a big downpour. Sometimes it lasts like a couple hours. Sometimes it's just, passing 15, 20 minutes, but almost every day there's rain. That's in the summer.
Yeah, absolutely. And then in November to February-ish, it can be downright cold at times, especially in the evenings. Like it's quite shocking almost.
Yeah. We've had days like freezing around the World Showcase, right? Like jackets and pants.
Wishing
and the whole
we
thing.
had toques or beanies for Americans and gloves on because it was cold.
Yeah, 100%.
And then you're also going to want to check out for like pool refurbishments. Those usually happen in January just because that is probably like because of the cooler weather, a good time for the pools because not everybody's going to be using them. And then the Skyliner itself also usually shuts down for a week or so around this time as well. But it didn't this year. It may actually in 2026. So I'm assuming maybe every couple of years.
Yeah, the last few years before this year, it did shut down for about a week. So it's probably going to be due for one in 2026, but time will tell.
Yeah.
Another thing that kind of goes hand in hand with when to go is how to pace your trip and how long you're going to need, right? So Disney, people have been to Disney, a few times. They know exactly how long they want their trip to be, depending on what it is they're looking for. And I think a lot of people underestimate how long their Disney trip should be. And we're talking here like if you don't have restrictions in budget or time, right? So meaning you might only have 4 days of vacation and your budget only allows for a shorter trip, right? So let's say you only can do a long weekend, like Friday to Monday, and that's the only thing you can swing because of budget or time or a combination thereof. Cool. 100%. We totally get that. And sometimes that's the reality and it's the only way to make the trip possible. And that absolutely, if that makes the most sense, then, by all means do that. But if a week of vacation is no problem and you can stretch, a 3 or 4 day trip into a full week, including travel days, you're more than likely going to have a much more relaxed and enjoyable trip, right? We'd say that this is the sweet spot for most families. And it's another question we get pretty frequently.
Yeah, so let's say you fly in on a Saturday. If you arrive mid-afternoon, for example, you could check into your resort, maybe hit up a water park if you're there early enough, go for a swim, have dinner at your resort, and then head to bed at a decent time for your first park day. You could hit the parks Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, then maybe swing in a rest day there on the Wednesday, another park day on Thursday, and double whatever park you would like most on Friday, which for first-timers tends to be Magic Kingdom.
Usually Magic Kingdom for sure, yep.
And then you fly back out to home on the Saturday. So this kind of itinerary, which is just an example, lets you enjoy each park, gives you time to rest and recharge, enjoy your resort if you are staying on resort, and then gives you a chance to just see a lot in one trip.
Yeah, agreed 100%.
And it's not that the shorter trips aren't great as well. The reality is that Walt Disney World is huge, and the shorter your trip, the more you're going to leave on the table for just another trip, I guess, if you can do that.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think people kind of like don't understand fully until they actually start looking into it is just how things are spread out. So you need time, right? And it's big. Like I was actually, one of my coworkers, I just kind of switched departments at work recently. And one of my new coworkers, he just found out that we have the podcast and he started listening. And like, he's like, oh, I didn't realize that, it was all spread out. I thought the resorts, the parks, everything was just like in a big chunk and just like you could walk, to and from everywhere.
God, no.
And no, like, absolutely not. Right. It's literally Walt Disney World is the size of the city of San Francisco. You got to take buses to get around, boats, monorail, Skyliner. There's over 20 resorts. There's the 4 parks, the 2 water parks. It's just massive. And like, once we started talking about it, he just like was floored, right? Just with how big it is. And, it's huge. It's a huge endeavor. So it could definitely be a week-long vacation. And even in a week long, you're not going to see it all.
As exactly what I was going to say, just know you will not see this all. I have known family members. I have lots of family who live in Wales, over in the UK. And when they have come here to the United States to go to Walt Disney World, they come for like 3 weeks because they know they won't, like, they just want to see it all, right? And they need more time. So, like, yeah.
And to make it worth it,
and they probably
don't
even see everything in 3 weeks.
Yeah. No, exactly.
So let's talk about dining reservations and experiences overall. So another thing that Disney vets typically don't stress themselves too much with is dining reservations. So there's some general principles that are sound when it comes to dining. We found that 2 things with people who aren't familiar with Disney, they either have no idea just how competitive it can be to snag certain reservations, or they are like hyper focused on dining at the expense of other plans.
Yeah, 100%.
So a couple of things here. Pros are aware of what's hard to get, but also know what won't make or break your trip. So some reservations like Topolino's Breakfast, Ohana, Storybook Dining at Artist Point, Cinderella Royal Table, Homecoming over in Disney Springs, Sci-Fi Dine-In at Hollywood Studios, just to name a few, are very popular reservations. If you are staying on property, you should definitely prioritize at 60 days if these are important to you. Whether this is your first or your 10th trip, just take advantage of that 60-day perk.
Yeah, 100%. If you have reservations that your heart is set on, definitely at 60 days, just look to make those. Yeah, because then you can plan the rest of your stuff around that. Yeah. And if you know it's not exactly the time you want, that's okay. You can always, move your lightning lanes or just adjust on the fly.
You can make it work. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And if you don't have your heart set on any specific reservation and you intend to dine at quick service locations, or you're not like super stressed about where you're going to dine, that's okay too. Some people definitely want to do that way, and they still have a great trip. But pros know that outside of these hard to get reservations, you can usually snag reservations leading up to the trip, right? Like, especially in those 1 or 2 days leading up to the day that you're looking to dine, reservations are often going to open up as people change their plans, right? We've snagged last minute Topolino's reservations, Ohana breakfast and dinner, Boathouse over at Disney Springs. And, we've also modified dining reservations to like a later or an earlier time. If, we're hungry earlier, we had like a big lunch and we want to push it later. Like, we found huge success doing that day of.
I think we've done that on every single trip, modifying
dining to something
or snagging something at some point.
100%. Yeah. At the end of the day, know where you want to eat and prioritize those if they're important. If you're unable to book, don't despair. Keep checking, especially as the trip gets closer, right? And the other thing that we're going to add here is walk-up wait lists.
Yep, absolutely.
Now more than ever, they've actually added this as a feature now on the My Disney Experience app. So you can see like wait times for walk-up wait lists at certain restaurants. Is just go to the cast members at the front of the restaurant, ask how long the wait is. If they are taking like people for like names for the wait list, essentially. And then you can do that as well.
Yep, absolutely. Yep. And just don't over plan dining either, and it's just a suggestion, but we suggest one dining reservation per day.
Yeah, one table service dining. Yeah.
Like you obviously have to eat throughout the day, but just one table service we find is just enough for
Definitely
us. And then
not more than that.
We're snackers. Quick service is always all over the place. So yeah, you have options with just the one dining reservation per day.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah.
So then when it comes to lightning lanes and planning around that, we've had many sit downs with friends leading up to their first Disney trips, explaining and going through the finer details of the lightning lane landscape. And we've said this time and time again on the podcast, but we do feel for guests planning their Disney trips who have never been or don't go often, because this changed so much since the pandemic closures that if you're not constantly keeping up to date with it, it actually can be quite hard to know what the situation is.
Super hard.
My gal pal and I, we went for supper the other day, and this kid was saying, "Oh, I like Disney and their Genie Plus," and I'm like, "Oh, friend, it's not even that."
And
anymore.
We've made that mistake too of calling lightning lanes Genie Plus because it's just flip flopped so much in the last few years. But 100%. Like if you went like in 2021 and you're like, "Oh no, I got this. I don't need to worry about it. We're going again in 2026. It's all good." It's like no, it's completely different. Yeah.
But like all things, people who go lots and often have their fingers on the pulse, they're going to know the ins and outs of the lightning lane system. Essentially.
Yeah, exactly. The key takeaways we want to impart, right, are these. Okay, so one, you need to familiarize yourself with lightning lanes, right? So this is the skip to line service at Walt Disney World. If that sounds like something you'd be interested in and you're looking to maximize your time in the parks, you should definitely consider it for some or all of your days, depending on what you're looking for out of your vacation. But I will caution that don't just think you can go in, buy it on the day of and figure it out on the fly, right? That's a surefire way to lead to frustration and disappointment. And we're not saying that you need lightning lanes to have a good vacation. That's not what we're saying at all, actually. But what we are saying is that if you want to skip the line and make the most out of your purchase, you need to know how it works.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously there is lightning lane multi-pass and single pass. And then there's also the newish Premier Pass.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's 3 options in order to skip the lines. So the single pass is obviously for the rides that you can just buy at one time. And these are the most, I put in air quotes, popular rides in each of the parks. They each have one. So you can buy that way. Yep. And then you have the multi-pass option, which if you're staying on resort, 7 days from your trip, from your check-in day, essentially, you can book your lightning lanes at that point, and then they're ready to go day of your park day.
No, exactly. And multi-pass encompasses almost every single ride, right? Like Lucy's saying, single pass is the most popular ride. So that's Tron, Seven Dwarfs Mine Train at Magic Kingdom, Rise of the Resistance at Hollywood Studios, Guardians of the Galaxy at Epcot, and Flight of Passage at Animal Kingdom.
Well done.
Outside of that, but outside of that, almost every other ride is included in multi-pass. That's a single price for the day for the park that you're purchasing it for everybody in your party. And then you can book 3 ahead of your stay. And without getting into the weeds here, these at every park but Animal Kingdom are tiered, meaning the most popular ones out of those are going to be tier 1. Everything else is going to be tier 2. You can book 1 from tier 1, 2 from tier 2. This is all at 7 days. On the day of your visit, when you scan into your first attraction, you can then book a next one. If you happen to have park hopper tickets, you can also book attractions in your next park. So as soon as you scan in your first of the day, it opens up, and your next one can be a tier 1. If you scanned in a tier 2, let's say Pirates of the Caribbean at Magic Kingdom, you can now book Peter Pan, which is a tier 1.
Yeah.
You're not restricted anymore once you start using lightning lanes on the day of.
And we have an entire episode dedicated to this. There's videos out there. There's all the information that you could possibly need in order to navigate the system. It's out there for you to be able to do some research before your trip.
No, exactly. So, the key takeaways are, if you want to have a good experience using lightning lanes, know how it works.
Oh,
and then, and then you can make informed decisions on, am I purchasing it or not for the day? And then same thing with single passes, right? Multi-pass is just not worth it in our opinion on certain days in certain parks. So for example, like, if we're going in September at Animal Kingdom,
we're not getting it.
Probably not getting it, right? So, just knowing that, and then knowing the ins and outs of, how booking works and refreshing for better times to make the most out of park hopping if you're doing that, or just, the most out of getting as many lightning lanes as you can get in one day.
And honestly, familiarizing yourself with the My Disney Experience app is first and foremost, because that's where all the lightning lanes are going to be.
That's where you're going to book
chosen from. Yeah. So that's first, and then getting to know the system itself after that.
Yeah, exactly.
So when it comes to packing and what you need, just know less is more.
Yeah, less is more, 100%. Yeah.
So this advice is true, not just for Disney, but for experienced travelers as a whole. Overpacking is a personal thing. And even some experienced travelers just feel a sense of calm by having everything that they could possibly need right there with them. And if that's you, more power to you. We're not here to tell anybody what to do. And then also, some people drive from out of town, out of state, out of country, and they just have the space to pack the trunk full of everything that they need. So that just would not be a concern for them.
Yep.
But for a lot of folks, us included, we get to Disney by air travel. And that means space and weight are limited. And if you don't want to travel with multiple suitcases, taking only what's necessary and just maybe a little bit more is likely your best option. We are very guilty of this too. When we first started traveling, we brought these massive suitcases with way more stuff than we could possibly ever need, clothes included. I'm sure we came back with 6 outfits each that we never even looked at.
No, exactly.
And then you end up always buying a t-shirt or two anyways.
Of course you do.
when
you
you're
have
there.
To. Yeah.
So nowadays we pack carry-ons and we only take what we know for certain we're going to need and use. Things get left behind, and we've just made a really good list of everything that we for sure need.
Yep.
There's a fine line between taking just enough and not enough, and experienced travelers have the experience to strike that balance pretty well.
Yeah, exactly. We'll usually pack for each day and then give ourselves a small buffer of a couple extra items, right? So a few pairs of socks, a couple extra pairs of underwear, an extra pair of shorts.
Emergency stuff.
Yeah, exactly, right? Just in case you spill, I don't know, mustard all over your shirt and you want to have a wardrobe change before supper, or, one of your kids has an accident and you need an extra pair of, bottoms, underwear, whatever the case is. It's just good to have, a little bit extra, but not too much, and that served us really, and I'd say even extremely well, right? Trip
Agreed.
over trip in the recent history, right? And oftentimes we're actually even taking things back that we didn't wear or use, even following these general guidelines that we're traveling with nowadays. And, I'm trying to think, have we ever had to buy anything out of necessity that we didn't bring?
Well, on our last trip, because of all the rain we had in Epcot, essentially our Epcot day, we did end up buying an umbrella.
Yeah.
We actually already had 3 with us, so we splurged for a 4th because our kids could not be under the umbrella
Yeah,
without
so
fighting.
the thought was exactly, we had 3. So one for Lucy, one for me. And then
the kids would share.
The kids are pretty small. So they had one big enough that they would be able to share, but then it just became a fight.
should have known.
We bought a 4th. Yeah.
They were fighting over who got to hold it, which, if it was me, I'd be like, sure, you can hold the umbrella so I can be a pampered princess.
Be my dude who holds the umbrella while I'm walking here.
Oh, well.
Try not to step in puddles.
That's probably the only thing we bought last year that was out of necessity.
No, exactly.
Thing, yeah.
And the Disney merchandise locations at the resorts and pretty much anywhere have everything you could need, right? So think diapers if you're at that stage in your life, right? We've been there. Over-the-counter meds, food and snacks, Band-Aids, and similar items. Long story short, if you forget something, you run out of something, or you gambled that you wouldn't need, but you wouldn't need it and you do, don't worry, you're going to find it here, right? We realize things are more expensive there. So we wouldn't rely on this, but just knowing that it's there as a safety net is, they have everything you could possibly need.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then you can even DoorDash Walmart orders and stuff like that. I know
absolutely.
when my cousin went, they did a Walmart order, I'm pretty sure, to their resort, and it worked out well for them.
That's always an option for sure. Yep.
So let's now talk discounts and discounts.
Yeah, we're like cheerleaders for discounts. Yeah.
So a few things. Disney pros know that more often than not, you'll be able to get discounts on something, whether that's going to be your room reservation, your tickets, a free dining plan offer, just something like that. The vast majority of the time, there are savings available for your trip, so do not miss out on those. And this doesn't just apply at the time of booking. If savings come later for your trip that is already booked, you can contact Disney, and if the discounts apply to your vacation, it can easily save you a little to a lot, depending on the offer. If you've got a good Disney travel agent, they should be checking on this periodically on your behalf. If you're planning your own trip, just keep checking back every couple of weeks or so leading up to your trip is a sound way to look at it.
No, agreed 100%. And, again, I'm racking my brain for recent memory. I don't think we've not had savings of some kind. A Disney Plus subscriber discount, a Canadian resident discount, annual pass holder discount. We are always booking with some bounce back offers.
That's our biggest savings probably is the bounce back offer, because we always know there's another trip. Exactly. And that bounce back offer is that 7 days after your checkout day from your last trip, if you book another trip, another resort, and usually we kind of have an idea of where we want to stay, you're going to get 30% off of your room.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's just crazy.
And the beauty of that too is that as soon as you book it, if you have to make changes, as long as whatever you're changing to still is within the dates that the bounce back offer works, you're still okay. So you're better off, make the reservation. If it works, great. If you've got to move it, that's also great. If you've got to cancel it outright, you don't lose anything, right? You'll get your deposit back.
There's no harm in booking it.
But the savings can be steep, sometimes as much as I think 35%. So huge plus.
Yeah, absolutely.
So where do you find savings? So if you go on the Walt Disney World website, under the Places to Stay tab, all the way at the bottom of that menu, you're going to have a clickable link that says View Special Offers. If there are savings to be had, for tickets, hotels, dining offers, anything at all, this is where it's going to be. You're often going to see deals for, like we said, Florida residents, Canadian residents, Disney Plus subscribers, annual pass holders, or just general savings that apply to all guests, right? This is probably the best money saving advice we have for any guest, right? Make sure you're checking this tab.
Absolutely.
I have it bookmarked on my desktop.
It's just a must in our opinion. Don't settle for the price you see. Check those offers. Just keep checking again and again leading up to your trip.
Yep.
So the next thing that Disney pros are very well versed in is the transportation situation at Walt Disney World. The transportation options at the resorts are extensive, and there are some guiding principles that make getting around the property much easier and much more efficient once you understand how it works.
Yeah, exactly.
So a lot of first-time guests underestimate the beast that is the transportation system options at the resort. The good thing about it is that you can pretty much get anywhere on property using the free Disney transportation. And yes, it's free even if you are not a resort guest. So that is a good bonus to know about.
If you're staying off property and you're like, I don't know, can I take the Skyliner? Can I take the monorail? Can I take the buses?
They do not question you.
100%. They're not going to ask you to scan your magic band, right?
They have no idea who you are.
Yeah.
The downside, if you can even call it that, because it's still great in our opinion, is that it takes some time to get around the Walt Disney World property. As a general principle, not a rule because you can get around quicker, but you should give yourself a 90-minute buffer or so to get from 2 points on property. Disney pros have had success using Disney transportation before, but also more than likely been stung as well, which we have been.
Yeah. Many times, right? So know that the system by and large is great and it works well, but it is fallible, right? Basically Lucy is saying. So quickly, the buses connect you from every resort to every park and Disney Springs. The buses also go from Disney Springs to the resorts, but not the parks. Okay. So you can't like park at Disney Springs and take a bus to Magic Kingdom.
No.
It's just not possible. The monorails connects the monorail resorts and the Transportation and Ticket Center, or TTC, and Magic Kingdom, as well as Epcot. The Skyliner connects the Skyliner resorts to Epcot and Hollywood Studios. And last but not least, the boats connect the Magic Kingdom area resorts to Magic Kingdom, the TTC to Magic Kingdom, the Epcot area resorts to Epcot and Hollywood Studios, and the Disney Springs area resorts to Disney Springs.
So many options.
So many options. Yeah, 100%. And then the Skyliner and monorail can shut down, and they do during like really inclement weather. And actually, so do the boats for that matter, right? So when all else fails, Disney will dispatch buses. So long story short, there's a ton of options.
Oh.
If any of those options aren't running for whatever reason, buses are going to run.
And the length of time that it's going to take you to get around just depends on where you're going, right?
Yep.
The Skyliner from, let's say, the Riviera Resort to Epcot, well, that's not a very long ride.
No, exactly.
Caribbean Beach Resort to Hollywood Studios, also not a very long ride. But to get from Art of Animation to Epcot, a little bit of a longer with a transfer.
Exactly. And that's literally the two furthest points on the Skyliner. So yeah, you're looking like, depending if there's a line at the Caribbean Beach to do your transfer, it could be 20 minutes or more.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And if you are starting from the Contemporary on the monorail, well, you're going to have to go to the other spots as well before you can get to Magic Kingdom. So, but if you're staying at Grand Flow, which is Grand Floridian, you're the next stop to Magic Kingdom, right? So it just depends on where you are. Same with the buses. Some resorts are further away from Animal Kingdom, and then some are closer. So your bus ride is going to vary depending on where you're staying.
No, and that's a good note about the buses too, is that from your resort, there are going to be like screens that are going to tell you when the next bus comes. So you can kind of time that when you're leaving your room. When you're leaving the parks or Disney Springs, that doesn't happen, right? So you get in line and the bus comes when it comes.
It'll come when it comes.
Sometimes
I personally think that there's somebody paying attention on a video camera that says there is a big lineup at the Caribbean Beach Resort, section for the bus. Maybe send one or two. And I think that this is what happens, but I don't know that for sure.
And even at the parks too, because that's a great point, because like we've been lucky where we're getting to the stop as a bus is pulling up or it's waiting there and
sometimes
we just get on.
Sometimes we've had to do a quick little run.
Yeah, exactly.
But we get there.
But generally speaking, we've never had to wait more than like 10 minutes.
Which is what makes me think that there are video cameras everywhere
100%.
Being watched. And there's somebody being like, hey, Riviera needs a bus.
And your mileage may vary there, right? We've heard horror stories of people waiting 30 minutes or more for a bus, but we've never experienced that.
We can't say that. We've never experienced that.
Yeah.
So certain resorts also allow you to walk to certain parks. So think the Magic Kingdom resorts, like Grand Floridian example. You can walk to Magic Kingdom, no problem. Contemporary, even closer.
Yes, exactly. Yep.
And then the Epcot resorts, you can walk to Epcot and Hollywood Studios. We did it before.
Hollywood Studios is a little further, but you can definitely walk it.
Yeah, if you've got the time and it's a beautiful day, go for it.
Yep.
And then you also have ride shares. So think Uber and Lyft can pretty much go anywhere on property, except for at the Magic Kingdom entrance. They have to drop you off at the TTC.
That's right. They have like dedicated drop-off areas specifically for ride shares, which are usually further than minivans. So minivans are operated by Lyft,
so
but they're like Disney cast members that drive them and they have better access. So instead of dropping you off at the TTC for Magic Kingdom, they can actually drop you off right at the front gates, like where the buses drop you off. And then same thing for the other parks. They typically have like preferred parking areas where they drop off and pick up. The big caveat here is that it's more expensive, right? So like if your Lyft ride was going to be $15, it's now maybe like $25, $30, right? So yeah.
But we have used the minivans before and it was
get out of
great.
the pinch.
Yeah,
100%.
we were in a pinch and it worked perfect for us.
Yeah, agreed. So the key takeaways there, right, is just know how, transportation works. Mm-hmm. It can take a deceptive amount of time to get from place to place, right? We've been stung by that before. Yeah. And then some combinations of travel are just not possible, right? So for example, like we said, like buses from Disney Springs to the parks or buses in between resorts too, right? Like you can't take a bus from Art of Animation to Riviera. It's just not a thing, right? There are other ways, like if it's connected by Skyliner or monorail, you can do it, but buses resort to resort doesn't exist, right? And then, like Lucy said, if you're pressed for time, always consider a ride share, because if it's, if you're thinking that, if I take the bus back to the resort, I'm going to miss my dining reservation, we're going to be on the hook for those, $10 fee for each person, then just get in a ride share, get there as quick as possible.
Save yourself the
saved
headache.
us a couple times.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So when it comes to in-park survival tips, Best time to ride the popular attractions. So if you've been listening to us for a while, you know we're huge advocates for heading to the parks early in the morning. The old saying, the early bird gets the worm, 100% applies to arriving early to the parks.
Yeah.
So for us, like, we just find that we can make the most out of our Disney park days before lunch.
Yeah, and we'll give you a perfect example because, like, for example, on our Hollywood Studios day, on our most recent trip with the kids, we were there early. We were first. We were first at one of the touch points. We got on Slinky Dog Dash. I think it was 8:08. We got on Toy Story Mania 8:24.
Yep.
Like, you know, even in before early entry, we had like 3 rides done. We went over to Rock and Roller Coaster after. We had like a super efficient morning, which, you know, if you're rolling out of bed like 9, 10 o'clock, you're getting into the parks mid-morning. It's not to say that you can't have a great day that way. But again, we just had so much done in that early part of the day. And then we just kind of, you know, a little bit more relaxed in the afternoon.
Yeah, for us, we're just morning people in general. Our kids tend to be morning people. I know it sounds crazy. I'm sure one day they won't be. But right now they are morning kids. So
they're at that stage in their lives.
Yeah, where they just want to get up and going with us. So it works very well for us to get a good chunk done in the before lunch, essentially.
Yeah, agreed 100%. Yeah.
So another survival tip within the parks is taking advantage of mobile order. Lots of places now offer it. Oftentimes, the return times are available pretty much immediately.
Mm-hmm.
So consider doing that. Oftentimes, people are going to wait in these long lines to order the food when they could just be in and out with their mobile order. We have seen many times people standing in line to order their food on their phones.
Yep.
And I just feel like gently shouting at them.
Gently shouting.
Just go on the app and order your food and then get into the other line. But that's okay. That's not, I guess you can't shout at people.
And like, there's 2 things to that. Like one, if somebody generally doesn't know, then yes, of course, like we would want to help. But if, you know, if you're just like, you're not rushed for time and you're like, no, I don't mind waiting in the line.
It's a break for you almost.
Exactly. That's cool as well, right?
So we would never actually tell somebody what to do. But
No, but like just be aware that, you know, mobile order is available like almost everywhere now when it comes to quick service. So yeah, definitely take advantage of that.
Absolutely. And then use the My Disney Experience app for absolutely everything. I'm talking booking lightning lanes, checking wait times, map of the parks, show times for shows and experiences, checking restaurant wait times, joining walk-up wait lists, mobile ordering, checking out certain things at merchandise locations, just even like finding out where the nearest bathroom is and water refill station. Use it for everything.
Mm-hmm.
Just make sure you familiarize yourself with that app leading up to your trip. It's really such a great resource for pretty much everything. It would be hard to get through an entire Disney trip without using it. So
100%.
You should just know it.
And again, it's not that you couldn't do it, but it's getting to that point
tough.
where, you pretty much need a smartphone with the My Disney Experience app, because if not, you're really missing out on a lot. And, you know, Lucy touched on it, but like, again, experienced guests are going to know what the good resources are on the My Disney Experience app. So for example, now you can actually filter phone charging like locations,
spots,
right? So where you can actually plug in your USB or your charger and like charge your phone, water refill stations, shady areas to cool down in. And this really comes down to having been to the parks many times and just knowing where things are, right? It's like anything else. Once you've been to a place a few times, you start to get to know where the layout is and, you know, where the important places are located. But like Lucy's saying, basically, right? Disney is now, it's easier than ever, essentially, because now you can filter all these things right in the app, and each park has water refill stations and charging stations for your devices. You can just punch this in right into the search bar on the app, and you're going to be able to map these and even actually like map, and it's going to give you a little blue line and show you exactly how to get there, right? So yeah, 100%. And then the newer areas, so things like Connections Eatery over at Epcot and Communicore Plaza, they actually have like charging stations pretty much everywhere. So you can actually just sit down on like a bench and charge. So that's super, super convenient. And, you know, like Lucy's saying too, if you've been listening for a while, you know, we're huge advocates for taking a rechargeable battery pack, because then you're not tied down to a spot to charge, right? Like that's definitely something you can do. You know, you grab a nice coffee, you sit down and charge your phone for a while. But if you want to do it, like, for example, you're waiting in line at an attraction and your phone's getting low, just plug in your rechargeable battery and then you can charge kind of on the fly as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Another really good tip is any quick service location will give you free ice water if you ask. We use this absolutely all the time. Like, we bring our refillable water bottles as well and use the refill stations. But if you really want that really cold chug of water, essentially, just because you're just overheating, go to the quick service. They will give you it every single time.
Yeah. And like, you know, that's a great point, because sometimes you want just like nice, fresh, ice cold water.
water.
Because what you get from the fountain sometimes is like cool-ish, maybe even sometimes a little warm.
Yeah.
A bit of an aftertaste.
Yes, a bit of a taste to it.
It does. It does.
It does the trick still. It's there for a purpose.
And
but
I don't know if it's just me, but like I find that cold water, even if it tastes funny, it tastes less funny if it's really cold.
It's very true.
Yeah,
Yeah,
100%.
absolutely.
So that's the case.
So another survival tip that we will give you is shortcuts. This kind of goes back to what we were just saying, that the more you go, the more efficient you will be at navigating the parks. But we will give you some pro tips so that you can definitely take advantage of these too. So for the monorail at Magic Kingdom, when you get off, the vast majority of people are going to funnel to the skinny sloped walkway that leads to the front gates. There's a staircase beside the walkway that no one takes.
Literally no one.
So like I get it if you have a stroller or a wheelchair, you're not taking it. But if you are just walking, take the stairs. Because if you take the stairs, you are going to beat a whole whack of people that just got off the monorail with you, and then away you go. And next, which isn't really a shortcut, but if you can, enter Epcot via the International Gateway entrance. Even in the morning for early entry, a lot less guests are going to enter here. Plus, you come out smack dab between France and UK, so you can head on over right to Remy's Ratatouille Adventure.
Yep.
This has changed with Guardians dropping its virtual queue, but it's still really good advice.
Yeah, exactly. And, you might have no choice depending on where you're staying, right? So if you're staying at, the Epcot area resorts, you're just going to walk over. If you're staying at the Skyliner resorts, you're going to take the Skyliner, which drops you off at the International Gateway entrance. But let's say you're staying at a resort that you'd have to take a bus, monorail, whatever the case is. And then
it's always at the front. Yeah,
exactly. It's always at the front. If you wanted to, you could take a ride share. So for example, an Uber or Lyft over to Swan or the Dolphin and then just walk in. And that's an option as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We have done that before. It's worked very well for us.
From Coronado or whatnot. Yeah.
So another shortcut is first thing in the morning for road trip and throughout the day thereafter. If you are trying to get to Galaxy's Edge from the front entrance area, head towards the Grauman's Theater and then take a hard left on Commissary Lane. This is the most direct and quickest route to Galaxy's Edge, while many people will always turn left by Echo Lake. You can see it and you're like, haha, no way.
No, exactly. And it is a tighter walkway, but it's definitely faster.
Yeah.
And then over in Magic Kingdom, there's 2 covered cut-throughs that lead from Frontierland to Adventureland. And the first one is right beside Aloha Isle. And then the second one is right beside the Diamond Horseshoe. And you come out near the Swiss Family Robinson Treehouse on the other side. A lot of guests are actually going to loop all the way around near the castle or the other way by Pirates of the Caribbean, which either way is a lot more steps and wasted time, right? So these are both much more like direct ways to get from land to land. And yeah, you should definitely be using those.
Absolutely.
And then if you're coming from Fantasyland to Tomorrowland or vice versa, there's actually a walkway that leads to the left side of the castle when you're facing the back of it. And it takes you straight into Tomorrowland, which is much quicker than looping all the way around the Cheshire Cafe, like, by Semerdorf's Mine Train and the Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh. Like, no, cut through that little pathway by the castle. And actually, if you go through Cosmic Rays to get like the Space Mountain Return on the other side, it's even faster, right? So that's like the most direct route between Fantasyland and Tomorrowland. And then in Animal Kingdom, there's a direct walkway between Pandora and Africa. No, we're not talking about the main one. So most people will take that main walkway, right? Which is the one you come in from, like when you're rope dropping early in the morning. But there's a walkway kind of at the back that's super quiet because I think most people don't even know it exists.
Yeah.
And it takes you basically straight from close to St. Thule Canteen to the Festival of the Lion King.
That's right.
Yeah.
And there's some bathrooms along the way there too that are not very used.
Yeah.
So those are nice too.
Yeah, when it comes to Disney bathrooms, the more traffic there is, it's just
it's just common knowledge they're going to be used more.
Yeah.
So we're going to move on to dining next. And pros know that snacks can sometimes replace and supplement full meals over the course of the day, which saves you both time and money. And snacks are delicious.
Yep, 100%.
You can easily share a couple of cinnamon buns between 4 people, which is a lot cheaper than getting every single person a meal.
Yep.
The food booths at the festival at Epcot, there's literally so many delicious, sweet, and savory snacks all over property that are on average a little to a lot cheaper than a meal. We realize that you can't do this all day, every day, but replacing some meals with a couple of snacks is just a fun thing to do. And again, a really good time saver and a way to try a bunch of different things as well, because there's so many great options at Walt Disney World.
Yeah, agreed 100%.
So for quick service, we strongly suggest sharing entrees and ordering off the kids menu. Again, you're saving money, likely more than enough food for what you need during those times.
Like Lucy and I can split an adult entree or even get a couple of kids meals. And correct me if I'm wrong, but we've done exactly that like multiple times.
Oh,
and even on this most
pretty
recent
much
trip.
every trip we do that. Like honestly, just because it just makes more sense for us.
Yep, exactly.
We're good sharers. We don't mind sharing.
No,
And then for table service, last minute reservations frequently come up. I promise you they do. Walk up wait lists are often open, and then you can filter these on the My Disney Experience app now as well. You can definitely get a reservation day off. I promise you, we have done it multiple times.
Yeah, we've done it at popular spots too, like Via Napoli, right? Or places like that. So yeah, absolutely. That's definitely an option. And another thing too is you can actually cancel reservations within 2 hours, except for special ones. So for example, Cinderella's Royal Table, you actually have to pay for your meal ahead of time. And there's a 24-hour cancellation policy for that. But outside of that, and Victoria and Albert's, which is like ultra fancy, swanky. We'll never eat there. Exactly. But for pretty much every other restaurant on property, it's a 2-hour cancellation window. And right, things change. You have a big meal, you're not hungry anymore, you just don't want to eat there, or somebody is not feeling well and you're going to head back to the resort, whatever the case is. You can always make those cancellations within just over 2 hours.
We have done that many a time as well.
And then, people who have been a lot, they also know the value of lounges. So for example, the Space 220 lounge over at Epcot, you can order a la carte items and not from the prefix menu, right? Which is still it's still in that main dining room, right? So you get the same great dining experience with a lower price. And then you have places like Nomad Lounge, which is attached to Tiffin's in Animal Kingdom. The lounge is better than the main restaurant in our pavilion.
100%.
It's awesome. The Hollywood Brown Derby Lounge at Hollywood Studios, again, doesn't require advanced dining reservations. Same great food. Baseline Tap House. Great place to grab a beer and some light bites. And then the lounges of the resorts as well. So think Tambu Lounge over at the Polynesian. It's attached to Ohana. You can get like bread pudding, you can get chicken wings, noodles. And again, you're not tied into that fixed price. You're saving a lot of money, saving a lot of time, and you don't need reservations. And then there's also a bunch of like really underrated quick service places, in our opinion, that have like really great food. And like some of these are not underrated, but like, Satuli Canteen, great food. Flame Tree Barbecue, that's over at Animal Kingdom. Columbia Harbor House at Magic Kingdom has really good food. ABC Commissary at Hollywood Studios is like a sleeper hit. They have really good options. Sunshine Seasons at Epcot. We love this place for getting something a little bit healthier for the kids.
Same with ABC Commissary. Like you can get a few good options
We split a Greek salad there last
with
time.
With hummus. It was just absolutely delicious. And honestly, because park food can become
a lot in a week
after
for sure.
a while, right?
After eating fries,
you're just desperate for some greens or something. Like there are good options out there.
100%. And the last thing we'll say on dining is knowing how to strategically time your dining. So outside of dining reservations, because you can book these like 60 days, right? So you're pretty much tied into that. But if you dine a little earlier, like, at your quick service restaurant, for example, around 11 or a little later around 1, you're going to avoid the bulk of the crowds, right? And then the same thing for dinner. So if you dine earlier, so around 4 o'clock or later around 8 o'clock, that might be an option too, right? Pitfalls are that, 4 o'clock might be a little bit too early and 8 o'clock is really close to fireworks time. So if you're wanting to watch that, that would be, you would likely miss the fireworks if you had an 8 o'clock dining reservation or later.
Agreed. So another thing that pros know is when ride times are likely going to dip. So generally speaking, you'll see small dips around peak dining times. So think noon or around 6 p.m. or so. Magic Kingdom will see sometimes major dips around parade time, which is usually around 3 p.m. or at both the noon and 3 p.m. on days where there are 2 parades. A big caveat here being is that if you want to see the parade, you can't take advantage of that.
No, exactly. Yeah.
Much later in the evening as well, wait times will slowly start to get lower. Any nighttime spectacular will also reduce wait times, again, only if you're not going to actually watch those nighttime spectaculars. Pros also know about park hopping.
Yes, 100%.
So we didn't park hop for the first several times we went to Disney, but over time we felt a switch where we didn't feel the need to be in a park for a full day. So we were okay with hitting our favorites in one park and then hopping on over to another park to do all of our favorites there. Or maybe we started with a hard morning at Magic Kingdom where we were really pushing it to get a lot done. Then we headed over to Epcot for the afternoon to just slow down and hit up some of the snacks around the food booths. I think that just comes down to knowing what you really like and then making on-the-fly plans surrounding that.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, sometimes that's not an option, right? So if you're coming for a short trip, Park hopping might be the only way to
Yeah.
make the trip work, right? So in that case, we suggest talking with your party to determine like what's important for everyone and then
Mhm.
prioritizing those things first. And anything else you get done on top of that is just gravy, right? Which now that I'm saying it out loud isn't that different from the advice we actually give guests kind of overall anytime. And, making a priority list is always like good advice and then going from there. But when you have a week in the parks, it just gives you that much more flexibility. And I'm actually helping a good friend of mine plan his land and sea trip for early next year. So they're doing the parks and a cruise from Port Canaveral right after. So initially he told me he was looking at 2 days in the parks. And we've mentioned this a couple of times. We never want to force people, to take the trip that we think they should take. So I didn't tell him what to do, but I was straight with him and I asked him, what are you looking to accomplish altogether, right? And not to take anything away from him, I just don't think he knew everything there was to do in all 4 parks and how 2 days would be really restrictive, right? So in the end, we chatted about it and he's doing 3 park days with park hoppers. So he's going to do a Magic Kingdom day, a Hollywood Studios day, and then an Epcot and Animal Kingdom day. He knows what he'd like to do in each park and they're going to get as much done as they can before they board the cruise.
So another thing that pros do is plan downtime. It can be easy to try and cram as much as possible into every waking hour. And when it's your first trip, or maybe it's the only trip you might ever take, or at least for a long while, you want to see and do it all. And we totally get that. But it can make for a pretty exhausting experience. And being tired isn't bad, but stacking rope drop to firework days back to back to back over several days or more can be very draining for even the most excited people. So scheduling a rest day somewhere in your trip where you sleep in a little bit, you maybe make a nice brunch reservation, you swim at your resort pool or whatever pool you have available, go into Disney Springs to do some shopping, or go into a park just to walk around and then take in the atmosphere, like exploring the countries around the world showcase. These are all great ways to just slow down and soak it all in.
Yeah, agreed. 100%. Absolutely.
And this doesn't just have to be a whole day. Even making a plan to come back to your resort mid-afternoon for a quick snooze, a dip to cool you down, or just to get off your feet for a little while are great ways to break up the day as well.
Yeah, exactly. And then pros also know about Florida weather, right? So we touched on this a little bit earlier, but the Sunshine State isn't always sunny. Okay. So the weather is hot pretty consistently from March to November, with the peak being June to October on average. August and September can be downright uncomfortable and extremely humid. I'm talking hot. 40 degrees or over 100 degrees with the Humidex, and it's just a wet blanket, right? The summer months bring showers almost daily, and you can bet with pretty good odds that there's going to be a rainfall every afternoon in the dead of summer. November typically cools down and it can be quite cold at times, right? We talked about that. And then hurricane season ends around this time as well. So the risk of that goes way down. January and February can also be cold, but there's typically much less rain, which is nice, right? And that carries into March and April again, where the weather starts to get consistently warm again.
Yeah, and if you're coming from a very cold location like we do, I remember my cousin going in January and she was like, gosh, it's hot here.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's just because there's minus 40 in Saskatchewan where we're from.
Yeah.
So for her, that felt really great.
No, exactly. So, long story short, depending on when you're going, you may need to bring layers, right? You should always be prepared for daily rain, especially in the summer months. That means bringing an umbrella, poncho, or rain jacket. And we can't tell you how many times the forecast was calling for sun and, no rain all day. And then we get rain. Okay, so being prepared versus hoping it won't come is definitely the better of those two options, right?
Agreed. And then another thing that pros know is how early you really need to be at certain things, like rope drop first thing in the morning and fireworks shows. We often don't take our own advice here. We're terrible for this. But when you're arriving for early entry, you do not need to be the first to have a short wait and then a great day. If you're arriving around an hour to 45 minutes before early entry, you should be really well positioned to have a great start. And as it gets later, it's not a huge deal, but you'll wait a little longer at maybe the first attraction and you'll lose some efficiency in that first part of the day. Now, that's a conscious thing, right? You may be at peace with that and are okay arriving a little later. We've done this a couple of times. Not often, because Oliver especially has a really hard time not taking full advantage.
Yep.
But that's just something we know ahead of time that we won't be there first thing.
If we decide to do that.
If we decide to do that, and we have prepared ourselves mentally that we will not be the first to check in the morning.
It's just a different day at that point, and that's all good. Yeah. And then for other events like Happily Ever After and Luminous, there's really no need to scope out a spot super early, right? They're going to sandwich people as tight as possible until pretty much the last minute before the show starts. So you might find the perfect spot, right? And it's an hour or more before the show and you're you sit down and hey, this is great. But then right before the show starts, you're going to be asked to stand and move forward to make space for other guests as the show times like get really near, right? So you're better off using your park time doing something else.
Like I hate seeing people sitting there for fireworks 3 hours before, and
my God.
and you see it, and you're like,
and you see it,
come on, you guys, get up, go explore,
no,
go
because
enjoy
you're
your
gonna
day.
like short of being like right against those railings, like around like the the greenery in the
even
hub.
Then, like,
but like
don't think you're not going to have 20 other people like just shoulder to shoulder with you. So
it does get pretty shoulder to shoulder there.
Very much so.
Yeah. And there is a caveat to this, which is phantasmic, right? So it's seating in an amphitheater there. So the earlier you arrive, the choosier you're going to be able to be about your seat. That's just the reality of that specific show.
But even for Phantasmic, honestly, there's no bad seat.
No,
like there's some a little bit more off to the side,
Yeah.
and maybe you wanted right in the middle, but you will still have a great time at the show no matter where
you're
you're
way
sitting.
off to the right, way off to the left, you still have a great show.
We promise.
It's still awesome. Yeah, agreed, 100%. And for parades like Festival of the Fantasy Parade at Magic Kingdom, if you're not super picky about where you're watching it from, you can actually find good viewing spots much closer to parade time over in Frontierland, which is actually where the parade kicks off. Plus, you won't have to wait nearly as long for the parade to get to you because that's where it starts.
That's my favorite spot to watch.
100%, because if you're like, let's say you're way down on Main Street, it's going to take the parade like 20-25 minutes to get to you.
There's no shade either. We learned that this time.
And you're going to have to get in line like way earlier. So let's say you scope out your spot like 45 minutes before, and then the parade starts at 3, but it's not going to get to you till like 3:20, 3:25. That's a long time.
I was feeling cranky this last time. I was I want to leave.
And we had ice cream. Yeah.
And we had ice cream. Yeah. And it was hot. So yeah, honestly, best advice for the Magic Kingdom parade
Frontierland.
is to definitely see it at Frontierland.
Yeah, agreed, 100%. And then we'll wrap things up with our favorite hard-learned lessons. Okay, so we touched on a couple of these already, but we've been caught by bad weather when it was calling for sunshine. Weather is really unpredictable down there, and like weather as in general, right? But it just seems that much worse in Central Florida.
So just prepare yourself that there could be rain.
Yep.
Just prepare yourself.
100%.
And then, of course, the ride breakdowns or unexpected closures. We can't tell you how many times we've rope dropped an attraction. I don't want to call one out, but Seven Dwarfs Mine Train. And it did not open on time or at all. Like I said, this has happened to us several times with Seven Dwarfs Mine Train. It's happened to us with Tower of Terror, Remy's Ratatouille Adventure. We've had ride closures during the day when we've had lightning lanes. So you're going to get actually an experience redemption, and then away you go. You just don't let it bum you out too much.
Exactly.
It's a bummer for sure, but just don't let it affect your day. Just keep moving on.
Agreed.
We've had reservations at restaurants that unexpectedly shut down. This actually happened to us at Sci-Fi Dine-In 2 trips ago.
Yeah, exactly.
It was weird. We were there for our reservation, and there
Something
was a
happened
little
in the kitchen
fire or kitchen glitch.
Mishap.
I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they just could not seat anybody for the rest of the day. So we pivoted and we figured it out.
Yep.
So knowing that things may not go as planned and being okay with pivoting is definitely going to make your day run a little bit smoother for sure.
For sure. And then crowds, right? So we touched on this already, but sometimes day to day. So right, one day you're like, you're in Epcot and it doesn't seem so bad. And then another day, you're at Animal Kingdom and it feels like way more crowded and you're like, it's 2 days apart here. What's going on, right? But that's completely out of your control. And like you could obsess over crowd calendars, but at the end of the day, it's so hard to predict, like, outside of those big events and those big holidays. So plan around, what works best for you, and then you'll still have a wonderful trip.
Absolutely. We promise.
And then the last thing that's, that we've learned the hard way is Disney Tech. Okay. Disney Tech is not perfect. And we've had the app malfunction like several times. It happened to us back when Genie Plus was a thing, when like 7 a.m. was king and you had to do everything at 7 a.m. Like Genie Plus, the whole app just like crashed and we couldn't book anything.
I will say that is one bonus of not being Genie Plus anymore is the 7 a.m.
But even that, like
time.
at 7 a.m., we've booked and then we get an error code and then we have to restart.
Right, yeah.
So like it's
technology. You can't always rely
exactly,
on it.
Right. And like we've had mobile orders not work and like fail and you have to go. And like, again, it's just a small thing, but again, it could happen. So just knowing that, that's tech. So that's not infallible.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, like this is not an exhaustive list of, things that we wish we knew when we first went to Disney, but it's like a good capture of it, right? Like we've learned, we touched on it at the start. We're still learning with every trip. We learn some things new, right? We learn some things that we like, some things we don't like, some things like some processes change. Like this last time, rope dropping at Magic Kingdom was different, right?
Yep.
Instead of waiting in a big mass at Cheshire Cafe, we were all pushed to the attraction, which was
Thank gosh.
way
I love
nicer.
that much better.
Yeah, way nicer experience. So yeah, things are constantly changing and we're always learning as well.
And if you can have a little bit of flexibility, I promise you, you'll feel a lot better when something does go a bit off course.
Yeah, exactly. Agreed 100%. With that said, thank you for joining us today to talk Disney. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any future episodes. And as always, if you could leave us a rating and review, it would be greatly appreciated. If you choose to do so, you can leave reviews right on Apple Podcasts. And for Spotify, you can leave a rating.
You can also find us on Instagram and TikTok at Let's Go.to-Disney, as well as on our Facebook page, Let's Go to Disney. We share some helpful reels here as well as some fun ones. The link tree in the show notes will take you to all of our socials.
Have a great day and we'll see you real soon.